Alright, today we're going to go over the three main grips. The close grip, the wide grip, and the Jedi grip. Easy. Howdy folks, welcome back to channel Traintrue, and for part 2 of the bench press series I'm going to go over 3 types of grip style for the barbell bench press and how it affects the bar path, your elbows, etc. So let's get to it. Alright, so first I'm going to go over my preferred grip, which of course is a powerlifting style. I do maximum width with my index fingers covering the power rings. That is literally the most you're allowed to do in competition. And actually I do feel most powerful in that position. It does reduce range of motion. But I would only recommend this if you have mastered what I talked about in the previous video, scapular retraction. If you haven't perfected that yet, this grip can be dangerous for your shoulders. But once you got that whole retraction down, you'll be very safe. I haven't injured my shoulders in years using this grip. So as you can see, these are what we call the power rings. This is a Rogue Ohio power bar. For wide grip, the first thing I would do is feel out those power rings, right? So I usually take my index fingers, of course I'd be laying down, and I do this. All right. Then, as you can see, my thumbs, I make my thumbs purposely parallel, like pressing against the bar at first. Then I do a slight internal rotation, so my thumbs will now shift this way inward. Then I wrap them around and make sure I'm secure with the bar. Then I grip it firmly with my pinky and other fingers, and that's generally considered the wide grip. However, from a different angle, we'll show you in a bit, you will see my wrist has to be cocked back just slightly like this. I'm not trying to go like that. You know, the bar is still in the meat of my hand, slightly internally angled. Alright, so from a top-down angle, I find my power rings with my index finger. I make my thumb parallel to the bar and I press against it. And in terms of where the bar goes on the other side, I kind of line it up with the line on my palm. Then, after that's secure, I will internally rotate so that my thumb starts to wrap around the bar. Then I will grip it firmly with my pinky, ring finger, etc. And the index finger, you know, it's almost like smushing into the bar. It's not like wrapped around the bar. I usually keep it pressure like this. That helps keep the internal rotation. So it doesn't have to be out here, but kind of keep it on top, pressing downward. And the thumb, I tend to keep it not wrapped around like a fist, but more so semi-angled. The reason for this again is internal rotation to keep it there. Now if you see from the unrack, you'll see my wrist is slightly cocked. And when you have a lot of weight on the bar, this is when wrist wraps would come in handy and take some pressure off and make your wrist much more stable. Okay. Now again, I'm not letting the bar roll all the way back in my hand like this. Keeping it in the meat of my palm. Internal rotation slightly. Index finger and thumb to lock it in place. And the most pressure should be right on that meat of the palm here toward that fold in your skin. With this grip, your elbows will generally be more flared on the descent, not tucked on the descent. This takes advantage of your pecs or chest muscles more, a little bit less tricep, and a lot more back muscle is involved in the descent for stabilization purposes. Alright, the second grip I'm going to go over is what is called the close grip. Now close grip doesn't have to be super narrow, it just has to be closer than your competition grip, as I went over before. And when do you want to do this? Well, some people don't have good scapular retraction and they have more pain when they use a wide grip with flared elbows. Some people just have really strong triceps, so they want to do that as well. And otherwise, for me, I do close grip as accessory work to make my triceps stronger, and it is quite different from the wide grip. Okay, so most power lifters generally do have some sort of finger on the power ring. Okay, as I said, this is my wide grip. So for me, my close grip would be usually considered like pinky on the ring, or any closer than that. Don't go too close unless your wrist can handle it. If you go way too close, you're actually crunching your wrist inward a little too much, unless, again, you're very flexible. So anything like from here, my opinion, to around here, maybe like thumb just touching the knurling, I think that's pretty good for close grip. And if you have the wrist for it, maybe this close. What's different about grabbing the bar? Internal rotation is not really that important on the close grip. Now, because I have a pretty wide close grip, I still do a slight internal rotation, so same idea there. You know, I kind of tuck my thumb in. But honestly, I just think it's important to make sure it's in the meat of your palm. Nothing crazy with the internal rotation. And I think what I should go over most for the close grip is your elbows. Like, that actually is what changes most. So closer grip, just line up my pinkies. Make sure it's in the meat of my palm with a slightly cocked back wrist. I don't focus too much on internal rotation here. I just grip the bar very firmly in the meat of my palm. Alright, so the reason you don't really have to focus much on internal rotation for the close grip is that this lift focuses more on the triceps. So when you unrack it, you actually are going to tuck your elbows a lot more on the descent. So more like this, not this, when you do close grip, right? So think about it. If I internally rotate now, like this, of course it would help me flare my elbows more. But it's very uncomfortable on my wrist, and that's not really the focus of a close grip anyway, right? So instead, I'm just gonna make sure it's in the meat of my palm, pretty flat, just grip it as firmly as possible. I'm not doing this with my index finger. And the descent will be much more tucking of the elbows, a lot more tricep involved. All right, now the third grip I'm gonna go over is called the Japanese grip, because a lot of those amazing bench pressers, world's best in Japan, some of them do use this. But a word of warning, this is a super technical, super advanced type of grip. I would not recommend this unless you're highly competitive in your weight class. It puts a lot of strain on your wrists, so you have to have super tight wrist wraps, and it does put a lot of strain on your shoulders if you don't do scapular retraction properly. So I'm just going to go over it quickly, just in case you guys are curious, because some people hear about it and ask me. It's basically a super internally rotated version of the wide grip. So what you're going to do is do what I did first step. You put your index finger on the power ring. By the way, if you're gonna do Japanese grip, you're probably only gonna do maximum grip, because the whole point of this grip is to minimize range of motion and maximize like power output through the chest. And then, instead of putting it just in the meat of your palm, you're gonna actually internally rotate your whole hand to the point that your index finger is actually just barely touching the power ring. And you're gonna purposely cock back your wrist as much as possible to reduce that range of motion. And so in reality, the bar is sitting in my hand like that. It's actually like on top of my wrist, barely touching the meat of my palm. Again, you have to have wrist wraps, almost guaranteed, unless you have the strongest wrists in the world. So with this grip, you just make sure your index fingers barely touch the power ring, because that's the rule. Then you internally rotate to the point that your palm, the bottom of it, is barely just on the bar. Okay? And your thumb is barely wrapped around too. It's not really doing much with this grip. And when you unrack, there's no weight on the bar, but if weight were on the bar, my wrist would be really cocked back right now. Okay? This is the most I can cock it at this moment. And you can see, just naturally holding the bar in this position, my elbows are extremely flared out. Okay? In order to do this grip properly, I would have to retract my scapula an insane amount and reduce my range of motion as much as possible and flare. It's like an almost 90-degree flare with the elbow. Again, I would not recommend this grip unless you're super highly competitive and want to reduce that range of motion. Even I rarely try this grip. I tried once in a while just to feel it out, and it does feel strong, but every time I re-rack the bar, I'm like, oh man, my wrists, they get punished every time I try this, but it is certainly a pretty strong pressing position. All right, guys, this concludes the 3 common grip styles. There are more, but those are the ones I picked for going over today. And incorporate that with the previous video, please, about scapular retraction. You can't just mix and match however you please. And of course, next time, stay tuned for even more advanced steps in terms of bar path, elbow positioning, pressing, foot position, etc. So I'll see you guys next time. Peace.
아 진짜 맨날 벤치프레스 그냥 잡고 그냥 밀면 끝인데 무슨 그립 하나 둘 셋 넷 하면서 맨날 뭐 디테일하게 뭐